What if everything you knew could disappear in just 10 seconds? Not slowly, not over hours, but in a single violent moment that leaves nothing behind. On April 27th, 2011, in Smithville, Mississippi, that is exactly what happened. A quiet town, fewer than 1,000 people, suddenly became the center of one of the most extreme tornado events ever recorded. But here is what makes this story even more unsettling. Warnings were issued. Experts saw it coming. Yet many people never received the alert at all. Communication failures, timing, and sheer bad luck collided in a way that turned a natural disaster into something even more tragic. How does a modern town get caught off guard in the middle of a predicted outbreak? And who actually saw the danger in time? Stay with me, because what unfolded that day is almost impossible to believe. Subscribe now if you want real stories that uncover what others miss. April 27th, 2011 began like any other spring day across the American South, but the atmosphere was already shifting towards something dangerous. Just 2 days earlier, on April 25th, a powerful weather pattern had begun to take shape, feeding off warm, moist air rising from the Gulf of Mexico and colliding with colder, unstable air sweeping in from the west. Meteorologists were watching closely as conditions grew more volatile by the hour. Across multiple states, storms were already forming, and the early signs pointed to something far more severe than a typical outbreak. This would become known as the 2011 super outbreak, one of the largest and deadliest tornado events ever recorded in United States history. The scale of it was staggering, with hundreds of tornadoes expected to touch down across a wide stretch of the country. By the morning of April 27th, the situation had escalated dramatically. Forecast models showed extreme instability in the atmosphere, with powerful wind shear and energy building at multiple levels. The Storm Prediction Center responded by issuing a rare high-risk warning, the most serious alert they can give. This warning covered large portions of Mississippi and Alabama, signaling the potential for long-track, violent tornadoes. At the same time, particularly dangerous situation tornado watches were issued, emphasizing that the storms expected that day could produce catastrophic damage. Yet for many residents, the warnings did not carry the same urgency they might have under normal circumstances. People had already endured 2 straight days of severe storms, and the constant alerts had begun to blend into the background noise of daily life. Earlier that same day, the danger had already become real. Violent tornadoes had touched down across the region, including multiple EF4 and EF5 tornadoes that left entire communities shattered. In places like Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, Alabama, dozens of lives had already been lost. In Philadelphia, Mississippi, a powerful EF5 tornado had struck less than 2 hours before the events that would unfold in Smithville. These storms were not isolated incidents, but part of a continuous chain of destruction stretching across several states. By the afternoon, the outbreak was in full force, with dozens of tornadoes already reported and many more forming. The atmosphere showed no signs of calming down. Instead, it continued to reload, setting the stage for yet another violent storm. Far to the west of Smithville, Mississippi, nearly 190 miles away, the sky began to organize into something more structured and dangerous. A supercell thunderstorm formed along a boundary left behind by earlier storms, a zone where conditions were especially favorable for tornado development. This boundary had already produced deadly tornadoes earlier in the day, and now it was primed once again. Winds near the surface shifted in a way that increased rotation, creating what meteorologists call a corridor of extreme tornado potential. Everything was coming together at the worst possible time and place. By early afternoon, the storm began to strengthen, feeding on the unstable air and growing more organized as it moved northeast. At 3:30 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for Monroe County, which included the small town of Smithville. The warning marked the official beginning of a countdown that few people fully understood was underway. In a town of fewer than 1,000 residents, many people relied on television or radio for alerts, but power outages and damaged communication systems from earlier storms had already knocked out those channels. Some residents had no way of receiving the warning at all. In that critical moment, a 16-year-old named Johnny Parker stepped in. Having created a simple text-based alert system months earlier, he quickly sent out a message to everyone on his contact list. Get to a safe place now. For many in Smithville, that message would be the only warning they ever received before the storm arrived. At 3:42 p.m., the tornado touched down just southwest of Smithville, Mississippi, near the Tennessee-Tombigbee waterway, and within seconds, it began to grow. What started as a developing funnel quickly transformed into something far more dangerous. The storm intensified with terrifying speed, strengthening into a violent EF5 tornado, the highest rating on the enhanced Fujita scale. Winds surged past 200 miles per hour, and the tornado began moving northeast at a forward speed of nearly 70 miles per hour. Trees snapped instantly at the recreation area near where it first touched the ground. This was no ordinary storm. This was a fast-moving, fully developed force of destruction heading straight for a small town. There was almost no time between warning and impact. By 3:47 p.m., the tornado slammed directly into the western edge of Smithville, already at peak intensity. The funnel stretched nearly 3/4 of a mile wide, a massive rotating wall of wind, debris, and pressure. In just seconds, the entire character of the town began to change. Buildings that had stood for generations were no match for the force now bearing down on them. The tornado followed a direct path through the town, cutting along Highway 25, and what it left behind was not just damage, but near total erasure. Entire homes were swept completely off their foundations, leaving behind nothing but bare concrete slabs. In some places, even those slabs were shifted or ripped apart. The ground itself was scoured, stripped of grass and soil. The most devastating part lasted only about 10 seconds, but those seconds carried unimaginable force. This was the moment when Smithville suffered its greatest losses. The tornado tore through neighborhoods with such intensity that brick structures were reduced to scattered debris. Plumbing systems were ripped from the earth, floor tiles were stripped away, and the wooden base frames of houses were torn loose. Trees were not just knocked down, but completely debarked, their bark stripped off by the violent winds. The town hall, police station, post office, and multiple churches were all destroyed in an instant. Even critical infrastructure like the water system was heavily damaged, leaving the town without basic services. In the middle of the chaos, there were moments of survival that seemed almost impossible. A man named Jimmy Cowie was driving his truck along Highway 25 when the tornado struck. Without warning, his windows shattered and the vehicle was lifted off the ground. The truck rolled through the air before crashing back down, leaving him battered and disoriented. He later described the sensation as feeling like his body was being burned, as wind-driven debris blasted against him with extreme force. Somehow, he survived. Nearby, however, entire homes had vanished, and many who had been inside them did not make it out. Survival in the direct path of this tornado often came down to seconds and sheer chance. The tornado reached its most extreme intensity as it tore through the eastern side of Smithville. Vehicles were thrown incredible distances, including a Ford Explorer that was lifted high into the air and slammed into the town's water tower, leaving a dent that still exists today. After striking the tower, the vehicle was hurled even farther before crashing down on the opposite side of town. Large trucks and recreational vehicles were also picked up and thrown hundreds of yards. The sheer power of the storm was visible in every direction, from twisted metal to uprooted earth. Even heavy granite tombstones in a nearby cemetery were knocked over in unusual directions, suggesting the presence of smaller rotating vortices within the main tornado. After tearing through Smithville, the storm did not weaken immediately. It continued northeast, crossing into Itawamba County and then into Alabama, still carrying destructive force. Along its path, more homes were destroyed, and additional lives were lost near Scottsville, Alabama, where the tornado maintained strong intensity. The damage extended far beyond the town that had taken the worst of the hit. Finally, at 4:23 p.m., after traveling more than 37 miles, the tornado began to dissipate near Hodges, Alabama. The violent rotation slowed, and the storm lost its structure. But by then, the damage had already been done. In less than an hour, and in just seconds at its peak, the tornado had permanently changed the lives of everyone in its path. When the roar finally faded, Smithville, Mississippi was left in a silence that felt almost unreal. Just minutes earlier, the town had been filled with the sounds of daily life. Now, there was only the crackle of broken lines and the distant hiss of leaking gas. The landscape no longer looked like a town. It looked like a war zone. Entire neighborhoods had been flattened into unrecognizable fields of debris. Streets were buried, landmarks erased, and familiar paths no longer existed. Survivors began to emerge slowly, some injured, some in shock, all trying to understand what had just happened. Many had no idea where their homes once stood. In those first moments, the focus shifted from survival to rescue. People were trapped beneath rubble, calling out for help, while others wandered through the wreckage searching for family members and neighbors. With communication systems down, word spread by voice and by movement. First responders rushed in from nearby towns like Amory and Tupelo, navigating blocked roads and unstable debris fields to reach those in need. Volunteers followed close behind, bringing whatever supplies they could carry. There was no waiting. Every second mattered. Medical teams set up makeshift treatment areas, working quickly to stabilize the injured before transporting them to hospitals outside the immediate disaster zone. As the hours passed, the full scale of the tragedy became clearer. 23 lives had been lost, including 16 in Smithville and 7 more in Alabama. Over 130 people were injured, many with severe or life-altering wounds. More than 150 homes were completely destroyed, and dozens more were damaged beyond repair. Nearly every business in the town had been wiped out, leaving behind not just physical loss, but economic devastation as well. The cost in dollars reached into the millions, but no number could measure the emotional impact left behind. Families were suddenly without loved ones, without homes, and without any sense of normal life. In the days that followed, attention turned toward recovery. State officials, including Governor Haley Barbour, visited the town to witness the destruction firsthand and to support rebuilding efforts. Cleanup crews worked alongside residents to clear debris and restore access to roads and utilities. The process was slow and exhausting, but it marked the beginning of a long journey forward. Over time, new structures began to rise where old ones had stood. A new town hall was built, along with improved infrastructure designed to withstand future storms. One of the most significant additions was the rebuilding of the Smithville High School gymnasium, redesigned as a reinforced dome capable of serving as a community storm shelter. This was not just rebuilding. It was preparing for survival. Amid the loss, stories of courage and sacrifice became part of the town's identity. One of the most powerful was that of Carla Jones, a 37-year-old woman who was caring for 3 children when the tornado approached. In the final moments before impact, she made a decision that would define her legacy. She covered the children with her own body, shielding them from the force of the storm. When the tornado passed, the children were found alive, though critically injured. Carla did not survive. Her actions saved their lives. Years later, those children would grow up carrying both the trauma of that day and the memory of her sacrifice. The impact of that afternoon did not fade with time. It continued to shape lives in ways both visible and unseen. Survivors dealt with physical recovery, emotional trauma, and the challenge of rebuilding a sense of normalcy. Yet there were also moments of resilience that stood out. In May 2025, one of the children saved that day, Emily Pearson, graduated from high school, marking a milestone that once seemed uncertain. Her journey became a symbol of survival and strength, tied forever to the events of that day. At the same time, the town chose to honor another quiet hero. In April 2024, Johnny Parker, the teenager who had sent out life-saving text warnings, was recognized with a street named after him. His quick thinking had given many people the only warning they received. Today, reminders of the tornado still remain. The Smithville Water Tower, still bearing the dent from a vehicle thrown into it, stands as a visible mark of what the town endured. It is not just damage, it is memory. The rebuilt homes, the strengthened buildings, and the stories passed down all reflect a community that refused to disappear. The tornado took lives and changed everything, but it did not take the spirit of the people who lived through it. What remains is a place shaped by tragedy, defined by resilience, and held together by the choices people made for one another in the face of unimaginable force. The Smithville tornado lasted minutes, but its impact will last forever. Lives were lost, families were changed, and a town was forced to rebuild from almost nothing. Yet within that destruction came moments of courage, sacrifice, and resilience that still echo today. From a teenager's warning to a woman's final act of protection, these stories refuse to fade. Smithville did not just survive, it stood back up. And maybe that is what matters most. If stories like this matter to you, make sure to subscribe and stay with the channel for more real events that deserve to be remembered.